Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 247. Can introverts influence? This was a question asked by one of my coaching clients a while ago, and I thought some of our resultant conversation worth sharing with you all. As you would expect, I won't break client confidentiality, but the principles are definitely worth sharing here as they involve perception, intention, and application. I was initially intrigued by the collective question, as though he were asking on behalf of all introverts everywhere, and that's not an unusual place to start with some of my clients. It didn't take long to uncover his particular problem regarding influencing, so we could make meaningful progress. More importantly, he was able to leave our session with a pragmatic plan of action that has delivered the outcome he wanted. In our somewhat weird 21st century reality, we seem to be surrounded by people who want to be, or whose main claim to fame is to be an influencer. I imagine that once you've shown even a flicker of interest, you have a few that regularly pop up on your social media feeds. But here's the thing. If you're not a fan of social media, have they lost the ability to influence you? When working with my client, it was helpful to draw some distinctions between what it means in reality to be an influencer, to be considered influential, and to apply the process of influencing. So that's the focus of this episode, and the reason that it's important to me right now is because I've heard a few introverts express doubt about their ability to influence others due to their introverted nature. And I'd add to that, because they don't want to be associated with the influencer camp. There's no doubt about the fact that influencers shape our views of the world, and not always in a good way. They attract those who are lost in some way, searching for salvation or a new way of being in the world. I can only hope that the young, whose prefrontal cortex doesn't finish developing until about the age of 25, will mature to the point where they can see the damage being done by those they follow. That reminds me of a meme I saw by Truth Theory, a news media publication who claimed to be facilitating the empowerment of humanity using honest, solution-based and thought-provoking ideas. Their meme summed up this situation pretty well, I think, so I then shared it with my own comment of scarily true. Well, it is to my mind anyway. The meme read as follows. The problem is not people being uneducated. The problem is that they are educated enough to believe what they've been taught and not educated enough to question what they've been taught. I think most of us will agree that we are in an age of information overload, but common sense and curiosity deficit. We are encouraged to become sheep-like as followers because to question, challenge or seek to further understand is deemed by some as heresy. What's really worrying is this lack of courage to be overtly curious, or maybe it's a lack of psychological safety to question and challenge what we're being fed. Dear humanity, we need to ask more questions, not fewer. Hear my plea. I'll admit to being terribly disturbed by the impact that the millions who idolise openly misogynistic leaders might wreak on the world. And yes, it sticks in my craw to call them leaders, but the reality is all you need to become a leader is followers, and these folks have followers in their millions. So I believe that anyone in a position of influence, whether intentional or not, and I'll say more on that in a moment, has huge responsibilities to deliver on their word. They have a responsibility to answer questions, to help people be discerning, not to shame them into believing. And I've witnessed a lot of that. I became alerted to the way some shamelessly manipulate people much earlier in my career, which led me to read a book in the late 1980s by Jeanie Laborde called Influencing with Integrity. Now, I'll admit that in my naivety, I hadn't even realised there was such a thing as unethical influencing. I know, right? Bless my cotton socks. That's why I have hope that some being duped right now will eventually see through the veil of manipulation. Some of the principles I discovered in this book remain a staple of my approach to this day. What I now realise and hold as a possibility is that some people are very happy to manipulate others and call it influence. It's their MO. There is a fundamental difference, though, which stems from intent. Where influencing seeks win-win outcomes through collaboration, manipulation is self-serving, so win-lose, where the only winner is the manipulator. If other introverts like me have been subjected to this in the past, I can perfectly well understand why they might consider themselves incapable of influencing. I'm here to fly the flag for ethical influence that builds trust and fosters long-term productive relationships. Let's face it, when I finally realised that I have been conned in some way, there is no way back for me. Are you the same? As Laborde puts it, unethical, manipulative, coercive behaviour opens the door to resentment, recrimination, remorse and revenge. Now, I'm not one for revenge or even recrimination, come to that. I hate the thought of using my precious energy in a negative way. But once I've allowed myself to feel the remorse and resentment, to feel sorry for myself, I get out of my own way and let it go. The longer I allow the person to affect my mood and my life, the more control they still have over me, and I refuse to gift them that. So, intentional or unintentional influence? Influencers are oh so intentional about what they want you to believe, do and feel. They create trends that others follow, whether it's right for them or not. They are typically self-appointed and no more knowledgeable than the average bunny. But it can provide a lucrative return, which is why so many young people aspire to be influencers rather than having a profession or a traditional job. Influencers measure their success by what's known as vanity metrics, numbers of followers and likes, etc. They're in it for the celebrity status, and their content is often deliberately provocative and designed to go viral. Personally, I don't know many introverts who crave to be an influencer, as it mostly requires being live on camera and sharing way too much personal information for many of us. On the other hand, anyone may become influential, and sometimes without even setting out with that intent. It is often gifted with a job role, function, or even through familial legacy. Those who happen upon this may take a while to realise the weight of responsibility that goes along with their influence. Ironically, becoming influential often comes the introvert's way, as it may be the result of a scientific breakthrough, and we know that introverts are often attracted to STEM professions, or the publishing of a significant paper. Being influential means the person may still shape our thoughts, opinions and actions, but as a byproduct of expertise. The metrics here are certainly not vanity metrics. That leaves us with the process of influencing. This is something I deliver courses on with my corporate clients, and the reality is that anyone can learn and then successfully apply this process. So my simple answer to my client's original question was, absolutely, introverts can influence. And I'll add that as introverts, we have the advantage of loving to prepare for these situations. You see, strategic influencing doesn't happen by chance. The thing to remember is that influencing, especially done with integrity, is merely an invitation. And if we really think about our lives, we seek to influence others on an almost daily basis. Whether it's the family, so we all get out of the door on time, team members, so they take personal responsibility, or your manager, so they get an insight into how a process can be improved. Sometimes we use reason, sometimes friendliness, sometimes we're assertive, and sometimes we bargain. All of these and more are recognised ways of influencing according to Kipnis and colleagues. Of utmost importance, though, is knowing your desired outcome, the why you're setting out to influence in the first place. What's the win-win you're hoping to achieve? Because if it's only you who will win, you're in danger of manipulating the individual. One of the reasons that many introverts mistakenly think that influencing is not for them is that it does require great communication skills, and many introverts have limiting and self-limiting beliefs about their ability to communicate effectively. You only have to spend time in some of the introvert groups on social media to see the plethora of examples that reinforce how we're socially inept. This is not the reality for many introverts, especially flourishing introverts, but guess what? We're somehow lulled into believing that if we're an introvert, we can't communicate. Utter tosh. That's a limiting belief. And when we take it on as I can't influence because I'm an introvert, that's a self-limiting belief. Try adding yet to that statement to see what that opens up for you as a possibility. One of our gifts is that we're typically sparing with what we say. So when we do speak up, especially when it's clearly structured and delivered well vocally, people tend to listen. When we add to that, using language that resonates with those we're influencing, we enhance our likelihood of success. So back to that question my client raised. You've already heard my simple answer, which is yes, we can influence, but of course there's more to it. Introverts can and do influence regularly, and when we play to our strengths, we can be really successful at it too. We do need to be clear on our desired outcome, choose an empowering belief, check our intent so we're working towards win-win and mutual benefits, select an appropriate technique and structure our approach, and use the right language for the audience. When you follow these guidelines, you're well on your way to building your influencing muscle. And because it's a muscle, keep using it to develop influencing strength. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.